Shortly after 5 p.m. this evening, the Connecticut State Police Western District of the Major Crime Squad located the remains of a human secret within a wall inside the building at number 10 Amistad Street.
This is the tragic case of Annie Lee, the girl who was killed and crushed into a wall on her wedding day. Annie Lee was born on July 3rd, 1985, in San Jose, California. She grew up in a big, close-knit family and was described as kind, caring, and always willing to help others. She is also said to be very vibrant, always smiling, and had an infectious laugh. At school, Annie was an exceptional student who graduated at the top of her class in high school and was voted as the most likely to be the next Einstein. After receiving $160,000 in scholarship money, Annie got her undergraduate degree in cell developmental biology from the University of Rochester in New York. It was while here that she met and fell in love with Jonathan Wadowski, a fellow student who was majoring in physics and mathematics. Annie described him as her best friend, and before long the two were engaged and preparing for their wedding. They set their wedding date for September 13, 2009. Tragically, Annie would not live to see it. As her fiancé went to Columbia University for his doctorate, Annie was accepted into the prestigious Yale University in 2007, where she was hoping to earn her doctorate in pharmacology. According to Yale, Annie's research involved enzymes that could help treat serious diseases such as cancer, diabetes, and muscular dystrophy. She was also very active on campus and had even written an article about campus safety titled "Crime and Safety in New Haven" for Yale Medical School's B magazine. In the article, she interviewed the police chief at Yale about the ways that students could keep safe and avoid becoming another statistic. Little did she know that she would become one herself. Tuesday, September 8th, 2009 was a busy day for Annie, who was juggling between school and wedding preparation. She left her apartment early that morning and took Yale Transit to her office at the Sterling Hall of Medicine on the Yale campus. She was there until around 10 a.m. Then she walked from Sterling Hall to another campus building at 10 Amistad Street, where her research laboratory was located. The surveillance cameras captured her entering the building just after 10 a.m. She would never come out alive. That evening, one of Annie's roommates started getting worried when she didn't come home. She tried calling her multiple times, but Annie was not answering her calls, which was totally unusual. Afraid that something bad might have happened to her, her friend called the police. At first, the police thought that they were dealing with a case of a runaway bride who had just gotten cold feet a few days before her wedding. But that did not make any sense, because her purse, credit cards, and cell phone were all still in her office at Sterling Hall. Also, her family and friends said that Annie was really excited and looking forward to her wedding, so there was no way she could have run away.
Annie has been planning this wedding for over a year with John, and she was very excited. She's been doing a countdown to her wedding day, and she was doing weather patterns to make sure that the weather would be perfect.
As the police retraced Annie's steps, they learned that she had entered the research center at Amistad Street at 10:09 a.m. Her electronic key card for the day showed that her card was used to get into the lab at 10:11 a.m. Then after that, nothing. However, 3 hours later, something weird happened. Someone seemed to have triggered the fire alarm, and the whole building was evacuated. But there was no sign of Annie in the crowd. Investigators sealed off the entire building as a crime scene and began an all-out search for clues as to Annie's whereabouts. After 4 days of searching, investigators got a break in the case: a red-stained shirt that looked a lot like the one Annie had been wearing in the surveillance footage, and it was found in the ceiling just outside the lab. On top of that, investigators also found red-stained rubber gloves, a sock, and work boots labeled Ray C. They also found red stains in the lab rooms that someone had attempted to clean, but still, there was no sign of Annie.
Today, authorities continue to work in the laboratory where Annie Lee was last seen. Authorities reportedly have discovered bloody clothing in the ceiling of the building. Published reports say the clothing is not Lee's. Investigators are also pouring through garbage at a Hartford waste facility looking for clues.
On September 13, 2009, one investigator noticed a foul smell emitting from the basement. The cadaver dogs were immediately brought in, and at around 5 p.m., the same time Annie was supposed to be walking down the aisle at her wedding, her mangled body was found, stuffed upside down inside a wall in the lab. But who was her killer, and why? An autopsy conducted by the Connecticut Medical Examiner found that Annie had died from traumatic asphyxia due to neck compression. It was later reported that the killer had broken her bones in order to fit her through the wall opening, which was the size of a computer screen. There were also signs that she had been violated before she was killed. The horrific discovery shook the entire Yale community, who could not understand how something so horrible could happen on campus grounds. Was there a killer in their midst?
That's just, it's a very sad thing to have happen here at the university, so, sorry.
I really tried to remain as hopeful as possible throughout. I certainly didn't think it would end in the way that it did. I think it's just incredibly gruesome.
A day that was supposed to be filled with joy and celebration was now dark and gloomy for Annie's loved ones, especially her fiancé, Jonathan. Instead of celebrating a wedding, both Annie and Jonathan's families had two separate memorial services for her, one in California and another one in Huntington, New York. Her funeral was broadcasted live on the internet and was attended by over 600 people, including Jonathan and his family.
We're supposed to share the happiness of our children. I look forward to meet you and any friend. John, even now, Annie is gone, but I still have you and love you very much, like my son, Christopher.
I think that I speak on behalf of all of us gathered here when I say that I will never fully understand why this has happened, or what happened to my sister.
Meanwhile, investigators were working around the clock to find the person behind the brutal killing, and within a few days, they made their arrest.
4 days after police discovered her body, there's been an arrest in the murder of Yale grad student Annie Lee. Police arrested a man who worked with her in the lab where her body was found. Tonight, he's charged with murder, and those who know him are trying to understand why.
You understood those rights. Yes.
24-year-old Raymond Clark III stood before a judge in a New Haven courtroom accused of murdering Yale grad student Annie Lee. He was pale as the judge imposed $3 million bail. Clark was arrested this morning at a motel where he spent the night under heavy police watch.
So who was this Raymond Clark III, and how did he get here? According to those who knew him, Raymond, also known as Ray, was a quiet, friendly, and popular guy who played baseball in high school and volunteered in homeless shelters.
He was just the kind of guy who would say hi to everybody, just a genuinely nice person. I never saw anything unusual, weird, angry, nothing. I didn't see.
He started working at Yale as a lab technician in 2004, and according to his supervisor, never got into any trouble.
His supervisor reports that nothing in the history of his employment here gave any indication that his involvement in such a crime might be possible.
Investigators said that they started suspecting Ray even before they found Annie's body, when they saw him cleaning the lab even when it had already been cleaned. When they asked him about Annie, he claimed he saw her leaving the research building at around 12:45 on September 8th, but did not interact with her. During the interview, the police noticed that Ray had some scratches on his face and left bicep, and when they asked him about it, he claimed he had been scratched by one of his cats. Investigators, of course, asked him to provide samples of his DNA, And sure enough, the police got a match. And not just one match, but his DNA was reportedly in over 250 pieces of evidence, including those found near Annie's body. Police also discovered that Ray was the only person in the lab with Annie that morning, and that he was the one that accidentally triggered the fire alarm with his or Annie's key card as he was trying to cover his tracks. When the police searched his apartment, they found red stains in his kitchen that later matched Annie's DNA. After this, Ray was immediately arrested and charged with Annie's murder. But what was his motive? And why did he kill Annie? Although Ray never really said why he did it, there are a few theories going around trying to explain his actions. The first theory is that Ray and Annie had a relationship, and when she tried to break up with him, he snapped and killed her. And this was actually not his first case of violence. According to his high school girlfriend, Ray got so violent when she tried to break up with him that she had to involve the police.
That's what?
He didn't want it to be over, and an incident occurred, and I took the steps that I thought would be the best way to handle it, and I went through the school, and I went through the police.
However, this theory was debunked by Annie's friends and Ray's fiance, who wrote on her blog that it was the most stupid thing she had ever heard. The second theory is that Ray was obsessed with Annie, who was not interested in him. When he made a pass at her and she rejected him, he killed her. Some reports say that he even had texted Annie to meet him at the lab that morning. There's also a third theory that Ray was a control freak at work and hated it when Annie left the lab without cleaning after her research.
You know, the only person that really truly knows the motive in this crime is the suspect. What made him do what he did? And we may not know till trial, or we may never know.
Despite the overwhelming evidence against him, Ray at first pleaded not guilty to the crime. Then he changed and pleaded guilty in exchange for 44 years in prison instead of 60. He also got another 20 years for the charge of assault. Both sentences will run concurrently, meaning that he will be 68 years old when he gets out. What do you think was Ray's motive for killing Annie? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section, and if you liked this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe.